Welcome, everyone, to this keynote session. I have the pleasure of interviewing Booth, the CEO of BrandExtract, on a crucial topic of aligning brand strategy with corporate values to navigate through cultural technological shifts. Booth is an expert in the subject, expert on helping companies position themselves, brand themselves, align the organization around that. They do work for major brands. He's worked for them, he's consulted with them. His company is thriving in success right now with helping people accelerate growth. So, Bo, thank you for being here today and taking your time from your busy schedule to be with us.
You got it, Steven. Thanks for having me.
And to get started, because not everybody knows your background and what you've done and what Brand Extract is doing. But if you could give us a little just quick bio on yourself, how did you get to this point? And then what does your company do? That would be very helpful.
Sure, Steven. I'm Sobo. Started my career as a graphic designer. And then from there, really moved more into corporate communications and different things like that. Brand Extract's been around for 18 years, almost 19. And Jonathan Fisher and I and my partners decided we wanted to really focus on brand strategy because more and more people were talking about who are we, what are we doing in the B2B space. So that was new. Most B2B companies didn't worry too much about brand 20 years ago. And so as we saw that, we built the company to be able to align corporate strategy with brand strategy and then execute and implement across different media and activate internally and externally with different stakeholders. That's what we've been doing for the last 19 years almost. It's been a pretty wild ride.
Sounds great. And we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of brand strategy and helping companies position themselves. And let's start out with cultural and the technology shifts that are happening today. But in your experience, how have the changing dynamics of the workforce influenced brand strategy?
Yeah, I think that we've never been in a place where we've seen more disruption at the kind of corporate level. Everybody's on their heels a little bit, thinking about how are they relevant to different key stakeholders, including their employees. And then on top of it, customers' expectations, I think through COVID and through the pandemic have really changed. You talked about it. I want more stuff faster and better. That's where everything's headed. But it's the same thing for employees. It's the same thing for shareholders. And it's becoming the same thing for the executive team. And so rallying around getting everything together is a big deal. And that's where, with the speed of everything and technology and changing, we're really having to work with our clients to get them to settle on who they are and what they're doing because it's pretty confusing out there for them right now.
And that's right. We're going to get into that, how to deal with that confusion and then the shift of culture. What one more thing I probably top of mind in the brand is AI. AI is currently playing a big role. How do you see it playing AI playing into brand strategy development and in the future?
Yeah, when I finished, we've been talking a lot about this internally. It's completely disrupting our industry. Some industries where you got to move things around with your hands, that's automation. It's a little bit different from a physical automation standpoint, but from a thinking and time standpoint, my whole portfolio was hand painted when I graduated from college, and I had to learn the computer really quickly. So learning how to draw with a bar of soap, learning how to bend technology to my will was something that I just had to do. That's what we're seeing a lot now. It's the exact same thing as the early 90s where people were starting to figure out how the laptop and the desktop and the computer were going to change the way they did work. We're seeing the same thing with AI. Some industries may get completely taken over, but the yeoman kind of making craftsman side of things where people want to put pen to paper, that's going to completely change. And I think the idea that doing more stuff better has got to be part of the conversation all the time now. And that's what we're seeing. I think agencies have done a really poor job of keeping up with that over time. And that's what's happening right now with us with AI is how do we do more stuff better? How do we work alongside this technology to do better work of things we love to do better?
Give us some examples of how companies should approach integrating AI technology advancements in their brand strategies without losing their core identity.
Yeah, I think that you are who you are, right? No matter how I dress or the cool technology I use, I still am who I am. My core values are still my core values. So I think companies need to be really careful to make sure that the focus isn't on the technology. The focus is on how do I use these things to do what we do better. I think that's what we're seeing a lot is everybody's got like all these initiatives for AI and technology and all this different stuff. And sometimes you can lose yourself in that. And if you're a customer service company, that's just stuff that allows you to serve the customer better in the way that you serve them or do the work you do better in the way you do it. And so I think that confusion between the two is going to be a real challenge for people because they feel like they've got to adopt quickly and they've got to get on it. And it all becomes almost an all consuming thing. And they can, to your point, Stephen, they can lose themselves in that adoption.
And the topic, we could go on in detail than we are right now, but I do have a couple more questions and talking about AI and culture change and the workforce. In what ways can
Mhm.
brands remain relevant and appealing to a workforce that is increasingly valuing flexibility and purpose?
I think that honestly, I don't think companies and organizations do a good job of taking the time and what do we really stand for? They've got a mission, they've got a values, they've got things that they believe in, but they don't really ingrain those things and talk about them a lot. They don't put them into the strategy. And I think the hallmark of good brands is to understand the audience, understand what they do best, and really lean into that and then listen to feedback as they get it back. And so I think that in order to remain appealing to a workforce that's more and more worried about this kind of thing, you've got to listen to your people. You've got to hear what they're worried about, but you can't just overreact to everything that they're concerned about. Just because they want to go save the world doesn't mean that's what your organization does. But if you can give them a place where they have a voice and where they have a saying, or where they can actually make some money so that they can go out and save the world, those are all the things that I think we're talking to our staff about. And we're actually encouraging our clients to talk to their staff about.
Okay, so we gave the changing dynamic of this market. We have customers are changing, your employees are changing, the underlying technology and the way we've used technology before is changing. Lots of changing going on here. And identifying and understanding the key audience is crucial. So you mentioned that and you gave a pretty good overview. How do you recommend that companies go about the process today in this changing, diverse market to help better understand their audience and what is key?
Yeah, I don't think I grew up in the carpet business. And so my dad was always talk to the customer. They're going to tell you what they want. Then you have to be true to what you can provide for them. And I think that general principle, the big thing is you can get more and more data, more and more information, more and more out of the conversations now, where they were the one on one discussion. Now we can get data from the sales environment that we're working in or the marketing environment we're working in. We can get feedback. We can use tools to assess sentiment and how a customer believes. So I think always talking to the customer, always listening to them, but then using these tools to better assess what's going on is are critical kind of moving forward in that to understand audience and adapt quickly. Then bringing it back to who you are, not overreacting to them is a key component of that discussion about who are you after you understand what they're wanting.
If you could break down these steps of taking that audience feedback, all of these data points, and then capturing it to ensure that it reflects your strategy, your brand, corporate strategy. What are some steps that brands can take to move in that direction?
Yeah. So step by step almost.
Give
I
us some
think
baby
that,
steps that you suggest that
yeah,
they take.
I think setting a benchmark, whether it's some customer sentiment analysis or just getting that kind of general, what do our customers think about us? What do they value about our brand? Having that's key. Most people don't even take that step to generally understand why is it they buy from us. And they usually just talk to the sales team and finding someone to go study that for you or finding someone that's outside of that sales realm to study for you, step one, to get your benchmark. Then step two is then aligning that all that information you heard to say, what are our key personas? What are our top two or three types of customers? So aligning personas, then journey mapping would probably be the third step of what's the journey you want your customer to be on? How do they buy? Why do they buy? What happens there? And then the fourth step would be in that journey, finding ways to track what is their behavior, what information, what messages are they responding to, what are they seeing, and then feeding that back into this same thing of kind of going back and forth again to get to what the customer is looking for. So you got this four-step piece, but then feeding everything back into the core strategy to say, are they doing what we think they were going to do? Why are they behaving the way they're behaving? Is there something we need to change? And then the answer is no. go back into those kind of 4 steps of kind of tracking it over time.
Thanks for breaking those down. It really helps provide the whole structure the company should build out. Can you share some insights on balancing the needs and expectations of different stakeholder groups while crafting the strategy? Because you have a lot of feedback, you got different stakeholders. How, how important is it to balance their needs and expectations as you're updating the strategy and informing people on the feedback?
Yeah, this gets tricky because that's a super, when I sent that question over, that's a super tricky question because usually people are like, I've got 10 different customers and they all want something different from me. And the reality is that shouldn't be the way it works. If Apple, I use Apple all the time. I've been an early adopter of Apple forever. I've been an adopter of Apple. Apple solves a certain problem for me. It's simplicity, right? It's easy to use. I can communicate with people. And so it's become a kind of communication network. Now, I might buy Apple because it looks cool, or I might want Apple because of the authority it gives me because I can spend more money on stuff, or I might because it's perceived by as a better creative tool. But the reality is, I still want a simple technical technology tool I want to use. And so, understanding what that core principle is for your brand and then understanding the different ways that people engage you becomes critical. And so to your point, I've got different stakeholders, I've got employees, I've got customers, I've got different customers with different seeming needs. But understanding what that one thing is and then go finding that customer that may need it cast a little differently, but they want simple technology. That bam, I'm gonna hammer them home. But I may lead with how cool and sleek it is, or I may lead with to get them back into that universe or that conversation.
Love it. That really helps. And I think as we are seeing your results, there's a lot to think about. There's big processes put in place, and the organization does help with that because and I'm grateful that they do. There's a lot
Yep.
to deal here. I do want to touch base a little bit on the role of data, refining your corporate
Mhm.
strategy and aligning those key organization figures. Because we talk about feedback, people can interpret it many ways. Talk about building a
Yeah.
process. How important is data to put together this machine to continuously optimize your strategy?
Well, Steve, so I'm Italian and German. So the Italian in me wants to go, all this data doesn't matter. It's all about passion and love. But you've got to, I think organizations now have access to so much information, customer behavior, customer sentiment. You can start to tie that stuff back to overall corporate value and brand value. And so data becomes more important because it's more and more accessible. And the more, and there are tools, more tools are coming out daily to allow you to get visibility on what a customer's behavior is and then track, okay, I put out these 5 things with these 2 messages. Here's what people responded to. Okay, automate change. That's all great, but there's still that Italian part that wants to go, okay, why is that? What is it that's making them respond? Is it the color of the headline? Is it the way it looks? Is it the message that we put out there? And so there's this kind of human art side, and then there's this quant side, this data side that makes it even easier to see what the behavior is and understand and make adjustments and tweaks as opposed to making an assumption. And so I think, Stephen, that's the big thing that's happened is that data is less just a bunch of spreadsheets and somebody's got to dig through it. You're starting to get fed to you in ways that makes more sense. So you can ask better questions of your customer, ask better questions of your employees to get to the right message and story to help you move your brand forward.
That's very helpful. Now that we talked a little bit about process and strategy and the changing dynamics, becoming unique and differentiated in this market, okay? What approach do you what approach do you suggest to uncover what truly makes a brand unique?
Yeah, I think the way that we've always worked has been, let's go talk to executives. Let's understand from the executive team, what's the corporate strategy? What are we trying to communicate? What do we believe makes people buy our products? Why do we believe our product is valuable or invaluable to our customer? And then where do we want to go as an organization? Getting that understanding first is critical. Second, go talk to the employee. You go talk to the staff, go talk to the person that turned the bolt or making the product or selling the product and understand what they believe. So you can see the gap in this is who we believe. This is what our market study says. This is what our organization says needs to happen. This is what we're really delivering. If a company says they want to be fast and there are a bunch of people in the back office hand sewing things and they're all talking about craftsmanship, there's a problem there, right? You don't want to go to market with that disconnect and then go talk to the customer. But don't just talk to the customer about, okay, what do you want to buy? What do you expect from a product or service that you're going to spend money on? Whether it's a golf ball or a golf tee or a t-shirt or a whatever, it's got to impact your life in some way. It makes you feel better. It makes you feel like you hit the golf ball better. It makes you feel like you can't change a tire without them. Whatever it is, there's a question behind the question and when talking to the customer that's important. And then there's going out and looking at the marketplace, going and look at the competition and understanding from the competition, what are they saying? What do they see? So you can see some similarities, but you can also start to see the white space. But the process is, again, set the benchmark on what we believe the company needs to be, understand what the company is actually delivering from the inside out, understand how the outside is receiving the the product and service and why it matters to them, not just that what it does, but why it matters to them, how it impacts their lives, and then go out and look at the marketplace to see what are the peers and close competitors and competition doing, so you can understand, okay, where's my story in the middle of that? Because at the end of the day, it still comes back to this executive level. This is who we believe is buying our product and why we want them to buy it. And you may shift that a little bit based on some of that research.
And what are the steps that you take, or how can companies leverage their unique qualities that you're discovered in the process you just outlined for competitive advantage in a saturated or commoditized market, right? How that's a key ingredient. How do you
Yeah.
differentiate yourself and win? What
Yeah.
how do you help companies do that? It's probably the hard part,
Yeah.
hardest part of the
That's
game.
the It is. I think that, and the challenge becomes if we come at it from the standpoint of everything's a commodity now. The minute you can click a button and get something sent to you, is it slightly better? Is that shirt a little softer or a little bit harder? A little bit, is the collar slightly? There's certain things that make a difference in the way that you like to wear something or use a service or product. But if you take the assumption that everything's commoditized in what some way, shape, or form, and there's very little difference in and perceived difference in the quality. Then what you need to do is you've got to go find the people that you want to communicate to. You've got to go find the right customer. You've got to go find the one that fits you, that fits your brand, that fits your product. And it's the idea of whole fishing with a net or fishing with a lure, right? I'm going to go fish with a net. I'm going to catch everything. They may not all fit what I want to make at the table, but I'm going to fish with a certain lure and I'm going to go get them. That's where we had this conversation about data and technology. It's getting easier and easier if you follow that process of setting the persona of the customer, understanding their journey to really understand what customer fits your brand and the way you deliver a certain product, and then the messages and story they need to hear. And so understanding all that, putting all this together in a big spaghetti bowl and mixing it around, you start to understand why I fit where I fit, how people feel or need me to feel to engage with me, and then what are the reasons to believe in my product so that they can get to buying. And so those are I think that's those unique qualities, finding those unique qualities as reasons to believe are critical as you're going through all this.
That helps. And then you touched on storytelling, the importance of storytelling to position your brand. How can
Yeah.
it be effectively implemented, right? So, how do we implement storytelling to be able to differentiate
Yeah.
ourselves and make our brands more human?
I think we won't talk about religion here, but take religion, right? Uh, Hammering home the same stories over time gets them ingrained into a society or a culture. The books that I read to my kids when they were younger, over and over, I can't tell you how many Dr. Seuss books I have memorized, and the stories they tell and the kind of neat little things about being friendly. Don't be scared of those spooky empty pants, Dr. Seuss. It's the same thing for organizations. You know, organizations need to tell their stories regularly. It can't just be a big speaking at you, but they need to ingrain the brand promise. They need to ingrain the mission and values. They need to ingrain those things into everything that they're doing. It doesn't have to be overt. They have to translate those into why they matter to the audience, but they need to talk about them. And I think that's the biggest thing is sometimes we just flip on the sell or get the stock price up and we stop talking about that story of why this brand is important. The Elon Musk, I'm going to send somebody to Mars with SpaceX, or I'm going to save the world with electric vehicles. That story has to be in there to get somebody to work at that level to make that thing happen. And I think it sounds really simple, but it's tell his story over and weave it into everything you're doing, I think is critical because you want that your entire organization selling to you the right way.
That's very important, and you've helped many companies do this, position themselves, tell their story. Now, from all your experience, what are some of the common pitfalls companies face when trying to
Yeah.
differentiate their brand, and how can we avoid those?
I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. I think the two biggest pitfalls companies make, maybe let's call it three now, because I'm putting some thought to
Yeah,
this as we're talking. One is just setting a story and then never talking about it again. We see that a lot where they'll bring us in, we'll get everything going, we'll mix everything into their sales program or their communications program, but then they won't talk about it internally and they won't build it into the story that the chief executive is telling to its employees or shareholders. So one, tell the freaking story. If you're going to spend the time and the money to do it, then do it. Two, as you get heavier into data, overreacting to micro data or little trends or little things is really because it all looks like it's important because it's actually quantifiable and it may be a small percentage of your customer or it may be an anomaly. And so being careful with the data, I think is important. And then lastly, chasing trends so that both of those things, oh, Johnny and the company said that we don't, shouldn't do this anymore. And Susie customer said that she hated this. Oh, maybe there's a trend and we'll go make this product that says something else. I think we see that a lot, that sometimes companies will chase a trend that is almost a mirage to them because they think their customers moving there, or they just think the market's moving that way. And the reality is they lose track of who they are.
those are good common pitfalls and how to avoid them. And one of them is about the competitor, right? How important is looking at your competition, and how should that affect your positioning and your strategy?
I think you use the competitive message. I've always been a kind of do your thing. I'm a Texas Tech grad, and so Mike Leach's offense was Mike Leach's offense. They just ran. It was a couple simple plays, and they didn't whatever their defense was getting thrown at them, they just adapted to it. I think competitors. I think when you go look at competitors, like we talked about earlier, one, you're looking to find white space. Is there somewhere they're not competing that you can compete, or is there some messaging or story that they're telling that you can differentiate on? That's the big thing on brand, right? We want to say the same thing either that our customer's saying. But if we do the exact same thing, how do we differentiate? But then on the other side of it, competitors, you shouldn't be following your competitors. You want to lead. You want to be a leadership brand. And so seeing what they're doing is one thing. Following what they're doing is another. And there is a strategy there where you're a second mover and you just follow somebody. And if that's your company, that's your company. But eventually you've got to go find that customer that fits your product the way you make it the right way. And so just understanding, I would use competitive data as just understanding, not really what's going on in the market until I get more data.
Yeah, that is great. And so we've broken down some just high level. And if anybody in the audience needs more detail on brand positioning, differentiation, building the whole process, this is where
Hmm.
you got to reach out to Bo. Or we're moving on a little bit. I want to tackle the topic of a holistic brand integration. So
Yeah.
you have your positioning, where you're framing yourself with competition, ensuring brand alignment across various departments and initiatives it's not a small feat to do. How do you
Mm-mm.
recommend companies approach this challenge?
I think we've talked a little bit about it, and this may be oversimplification, but communicate, right? I think the biggest thing is being deliberate about your brand promise and story and building it into, and we've done this with a handful of our customers. Everybody, that seems to be a big trend right now is employee value propositions and ingraining your story into reviews, ingraining your story into your team's metrics, ingraining the values that you're supposed to live by and the value of the product that you're providing into the sales toolkits and all of the things that are going out there, not just the website and a handful of other materials, but really putting that story in there and then building it into almost a train the trainer kind of thing. Where is that little handbook for the manager? Where's that little handbook for the sales manager? Where's that little handbook for the investor relations person that's saying, these are the three things we do. Our company, they've recently moved on, but Will Scott, one of our long-term clients, they were great, man. Their corporate strategy was here, lease more units, fill it up with essentials that their customer need and delight the customer. Bang, bang. That was their brand. And their brand output was ready to work. At the end of the day, they had their customer ready to work when a job needed to start, and when a job needed to end, they needed to get them off the site. They were more in the construction kind of education space. And they hammered those three messages home in all their sales meetings, in all of their investor calls and everything they did. And they were true to it too, separate to that, Steve. And that's the other thing is you can talk about it, but if you don't live it, it doesn't matter. They ingrained it in operations. They picked up equipment faster. They filled things up the right way. They gave them better equipment. They fixed leaks when there were issues, those kinds of things. So branding is some of it's built on action too.
So you mentioned investor relations, sales and marketing, a handbook, ingraining with managers. Can you share some best practices of how you do that ingrainment? How does that, is it besides the
Mhm.
handbook, right? What is it
Yeah, yeah,
that a
yeah.
company should do to get that
Yeah,
pollinated,
yeah. Yeah,
get the word?
well, I think that one, if you do that right at the beginning, you're finding things that are true to the organization anyway. People are already behaving that way or they're already acting that way. So then it really truly is a matter of communication, right? It's a matter of executive enforcement all the way down into, hey, oil and gas companies used to do this all the time. They used to have a safety minute at the beginning of every meeting. They'd have a little safety minute. Hey, I picked up some Legos this morning so that somebody wouldn't hurt themselves walking to the kitchen. It's the same way with the brand. It's the same thing with that story. You know, I mean, ingraining those little brand stories or messaging minutes into meetings and communications are interesting ways we've seen it. And then on top of it, building a brand toolkit for your communications to say, here are the assets, here are the headlines, here are the stories, here are the images that tell our story, here's the way that things look. And then training your team on those kind of execution modules and how to work with those parts. And then how to adapt those parts when they get feedback is pretty critical. It's going to be, it sounds a little soft there because I wish I could say, hey, you check this box and this happens. But it's just that constant reinforcement of the story and the message that ends up getting ingrained and whether you're hiring the right people or reviewing the right people the right way.
That gives a lot of detail from this part as executives are listening and they're going through a rebranding or they're going through or how do I adjust this market? You're laying out a lot of different steps that need to be taken, processes that need to be improved. Let's talk a little bit about a brand audit because
Yeah.
they may already have a brand and they think to themselves, "Oh, I got to improve it." Or should I redo it right now or do I just keep going as is? In your opinion, what are the key components of a successful brand audit to assure alignment across the entire brand platform?
I think we talked a little bit about it. What's that process to get to the brand position? Open and honest communication with the partner that's auditing the brand on what's good and bad about the existing brand, where we need to go, what we want to deliver, and where we're falling short. The customer's voice in it is critical to make sure that happens. The employee's voice in it so that they have buy-in. That was the one thing, Stephen, that we built it into our process when we started this, but we didn't realize how important it was to give a handful of key employees a voice in the brand overall brand strategy and auditing kind of what's working and what's not just for the information, but for the buy-in. So you get to give the right key people, the right key customers, the right key people. They'll tell everybody else for you when things roll out and they'll see themselves in it. And so I think that's a big key component of that audit is the organization seeing itself and its voice into whatever the outcome of it is. And then we talked about the kind of the competitive assessment of seeing where the white space is in the marketplace, seeing what other people are talking about. But now you've added the data analysis component where you can get into some perception work where you can start to see what the sentiment of the brand is and how that aligns with what people are saying so that you can actually start to quantify brand value, whether it's from price point or whether it's from stock price or whether it's from some of those other places. I think a key component of the audit now that we've added, other than the executive overview of where we're headed and what we're doing and why we're doing it, customer, the employee voice, looking at the marketplace, and then the data analysis of those things to be able to see, oh, wait, we're getting a 10% lift in the market. Why are we getting a 10% lift on our price in the market? Or our stock price is trading at X amount over our peers. Why is that happening? Or below our peers, why is that happening? Getting into that more data analysis is something that's been added to our audits that have been something that I think more and more customers need to look at and think about.
What about internal? How is their employees? Are they absorbing the brand? Are they absorbing the storytelling? How do you do that to make sure that's
I think
happening?
it's easier. Yeah, I think it's easier today because you have a workforce today, like we talked about almost, I think, in the first question, which was all about purpose, right? They've got a more purpose-driven workforce now that wants to have some sort of reason to believe in their organization. It's becoming easier. It used to be companies of engineers and more linear thinkers. They didn't care, but they want to be a part. They want to have a voice. And we use a tool called Office Vibe to collect feedback from our team regularly to see what the vibe is in our organization. We use that in how we talk to our customers too, and what we're talking about and what we're hearing. And so I think it's actually getting easier, separate, like we talked about the tactical, wrapping it into reviews, talking into them in meetings, bringing it up in executive discussion, bringing their voice, and then reassessing over time with little focus groups with your team, I think is really valuable to just keep their buy in. Has anything changed? What are you hearing about our brand? Those kinds of things, even for the larger companies. I think people want to be heard. They want the transparency now a little differently than I grew up with. And that's a big part of this too.
That's great feedback. And what technology did you say you use for
We use a thing called Office Vibe.
Office Vibe?
Yeah. And we use another one called 15-5,
Mhm.
which is 15 minutes by the manager, or sorry, 15 minutes by the employee, 5 minutes by the manager every month, every week to look at, give them feedback and set goals and reviews. Both have been really great for our organization. We've actually adopted them in a couple organizations we work with so that one, we can get good feedback, but two, they can build some of these brand promise and value stuff into their reviews a little bit easier and better.
Sounds great. Thanks for sharing those. We're going into our last section of our discussion. You've mapped out, we talked about actually the audit and then bringing in this changing environment. How do you reposition your brand? How do you improve it based on where you are? And then how do you tell your new story or continue telling your story, but infuse it in your organization? Now let's talk about the value that a continuous
Right.
improvement to your brand provides. How does strategic brand alignment contribute to a company's ability to command premium price? Right. Um,
Yeah.
Now you're talking
Yeah.
about I'm adding value. It's making a difference. How does that help?
Yeah. I think I learned this from barbecue. We've got brisket exploded in Texas years ago, and they can close on Mondays and Tuesdays. If they run out of brisket, they can just, okay, guys, we'll have some tomorrow. Sorry you waited in line all day. What is it that drives me to do that? That falls into that thing? It's smoked meat. It's not that big a deal. But why am I willing to pay a premium for that? Why am I pay a premium of my time to wait in that line? And so when you think about that things, I think one, what I can count on consistency of product. I'm willing to pay more if I get it consistently. I think we've all gotten used to buying a shirt and buying another shirt, and the quality is different between the two. That's not going to work. And then two, you have to believe you have to deliver something that they perceive makes their life easier, better, or somehow improves them. And you again can get quantitative data on this now as to why are they buying, what's going on, what's happening. You can start to see trends in what they're talking about. But your brand wins if you're delivering consistently and you're delivering them their perceived value, they're going to do it. Yeti's a big plastic container. And they're starting to make them lighter. But man, people will pay a premium for that cooler, even though it's hard to drag around. Why is that? The brand that they've built around it is really a premium brand that I want my friends to like me when I walk up with my Yeti and think a lot about me because I can pay too much money for a metal cup. Those are things that, even though they do keep ice longer, they do keep things fresher for longer, whatever. Those are all parts of that to get to that kind of perceived value. But then measuring that at the beginning and setting that benchmark is really important.
Okay. So the one big benefit is premium pricing, better position, better
Mhm.
branding. Second one is, can you share some examples of how enhanced customer loyalty has been direct result of effective brand strategy?
Yeah, I think I hate to use it's getting old, but using Apple and the geniuses, that's the best one that they came out with these stores. They're beautiful. But man, if I it's not simple enough for me, I can sign up and I can talk to a genius branded name that will help me with my product. That same thing I talked about with Yeti. That product is consistent, simple, bright color, not too crazy. All of those kind of examples kind of work. And I shared the one earlier about Will Scott hammering on these three things, customer light being the third. There's a service component to getting that trailer in front of that construction site. How do we ensure that happens?
That's great. Now, a little discussion on metrics as we're optimizing your brand, better positioning, alignment. There's a lot of investment going into this feedback. What are some of the
Yeah.
metrics to assess value creation through branding initiatives, right? How do you show you've added value?
Yeah. I think companies still, it's funny, large, sophisticated companies still get stuck in like hits, clicks, and visibility stuff. And the reality is, you should be looking at once you set that benchmark, right, in your assessment, you know, what's customer engagement look like? How long, how many times are they buying from you? What's the frequency of their buying? What are the patterns? What do we expect from the cost of the product and the type of the product and the wear and durability of the product? Soft price is definitely something that you can start to see move up and down based on brand perception. If you're tracking brand perception, various metrics, price sensitivity, margins, do you look internally, employee engagement numbers, ENPS or NPS scores? Those are all kind of different ways that you can tell what's going on now, even on the marketing side, whether it's through internal kind of campaigns and messaging or external campaigns and messaging. You can get more and more into getting data from them, from your customers, on for your key stakeholders, on how engaged they are, what the depth of their engagement is, and how willing they are to refer on the ENPS or your NPS stuff.
Those are some really good examples. What about regarding in terms of long-term growth? How critical is it for a company to invest in brand strategy?
Well, so am I supposed to say it's not, or like, I'm BrandExtract, so I got to say it is. I think that the thing is, if you do it right at the beginning, you set the right benchmark, and then you do quick iterations over time, it shouldn't be a huge, costly, labored thing. But if you only look at your brand once and then 5 years later you look at your brand, you're going to see a change. People are different after 5 years. People grow, things change. I think it is critical. I think more and more, it's everything the commodity for people to really understand what that makes them special to their customer. And that's something that I don't think people are thinking about as much. They may put lip service to it, but they're not thinking about it as much as they should.
Changes your whole organization once you define those key things that you wanna focus on, right? It clarifies things and it sheds things but it also helps you accelerate those processes, so, yeah, it's a big deal. Now, you've had tons of experience, you shared with us so much experience here. We're getting close to the end. What advice you give companies looking to drive more value through branding efforts, right? What anything
Yeah.
you would wanna give, final remarks based we've talked a lot, but any final remarks you wanna leave with the audience?
Yeah, sorry, the Italian in me can get going. Yeah, I think just talk about branding. I think one of the challenges, most companies see it as an afterthought or a communications effort. And the reality is brand is strategy. If your product is not the newest, best, coolest, newest thing, which is like such a small percentage, and it is a commodity within either premium commodities or low level commodities. What is it? Understanding you, and you talked about it a little bit in this last kind of thing you were talking about there, Stephen. What is it that's going to make your product stick? What's going to make it be perceived as better, even if the quality is close to the same as your competitors? What is it that's going to make them buy more? What is it that's going to make them buy the stock, even though I know that they're going to make this thing and they're going to turn this margin? I think having the conversation about brand and people's perceived value of an organization is one that people don't talk about. They talk about the book value, they talk about the numbers, they talk about the stock price, they talk about the more tangible thing. And there needs to be some time spent by the executive about what do we want people to believe about our product, and how are we going to go about doing that? And how do we believe it's going to make us more money and make them happier? I think those are all key things that I'm being a little colloquial here, but just talking about branding in a little bit of a different way, I think is critical.
Thanks for sharing those closing thoughts. It is critical. Now, as people listen to this, they're gonna say, "Okay, I may need some brand help," or "I'm missing these big key components," or "I just don't understand where to get started because you've laid out a lot for me to do, but I with my limited constraint and budget and time, where should I invest the time?" Because it's so critical to do.
Yeah.
How do you help companies? Is it how can they get a hold of you? What is the process like to get started? Give us a little bit of background on that before we end.
Sure. Obviously, brandextract.com. We actually have a branding guide on there that's exactly what you've talked about, Stephen, kind of what are those main points of things that people need to worry about and think about. But other than that, Bo at brandextract.com is probably the simplest way. Just BO, not the French way. But that's probably the easiest way to get to me. To get started, have a conversation with a branding professional, have a conversation with a consultant that really thinks through these kinds of things and can think about the brand in a more perceptual way. The purpose of branding is to get more people to buy more stuff at higher prices for longer periods of time. That sounds really consumery, but in the end, advertising is going to attract somebody and get somebody's attention. Puppy, monkey, baby, Mountain Dew. Marketing is going to drive them to the water. Sales is going to lead them to drink. Brand is going to be the overarching piece over the top of, oh man, this is what I feel about this company or this organization. And it ultimately is what's going to make it sticky or not sticky if they don't think that you're going to deliver on their promise. So that's how you get in touch with me. And I'm sure that there are people in different markets too that I know that there are people, great people that do the same thing we do in different markets.
Bo, thank you for taking your time. I know you guys are super busy working with some amazing clients. You've helped a lot of different clients, and you're so open to helping new ones come on board and freely giving of your time as well as experience. So we appreciate your time today. We've covered pretty much the gamut of branding strategy process at a very high level, but it helps people
Yeah.
understand what you guys do, right? And why it
No.
takes an expert to help them put that together. So thank you for joining us today.
Cool, Stephen. Thank you.
Special thanks for the audience listening. And then I know a lot of you will be listening post this interview. Please take time, reach out to Bo if you need help. And we thank you for your participation.